Okay, I'm joined by Russell Gunner, who is an athletic therapist with Club Physio Plus. I myself, full disclosure, have seen him for a number of injuries, some tennis related, not all. But thank you for joining me, Russell.
Yeah, good.
Um,
Happy
I
to.
yeah, I want you to start out, just tell people a little bit about yourself and what you do and your involvement in the clinic and the type of people and patients you see and treat.
Sure. So I've been the one of the co-owners of Club Physio Plus since 2005. The clinic's been around for over 30 years now. We have our main clinic in the Ontario Racket Club, which is a large tennis facility, of course, as you know. And so we treat a vast number of tennis players like yourself and weekend warriors down to very high level players. The kids are in the academy who make it pro. So we see all types of tennis players, from everything to tennis elbows to, sprained knees and ankles to back injuries and necks and shoulders and you name it. We don't see many concussions from tennis, but thankfully that's not many people falling over. But in the clinic itself, we treat everything. We have two clinics, one in Mississauga, one in Oakville, and we treat a wide range of not just tennis injuries, but every other sport too.
Okay, so tell me a little bit, you touched on some of them, but who, for the most part, is getting hurt playing tennis maybe the most often? And then what's usually behind those types of tennis injuries?
It's usually the weekend warriors that are getting hurt most often. Lack of warm up is one of the most important parts we see, and technique. People are not really learning how to do a proper technique. You don't see a pro like Rafa or Alcaraz, those guys who have a tennis elbow. They'll be, more lower body stuff, maybe more hip issues, knee issues or something, because they're hitting properly. And most amateurs don't. They squeeze the racket too hard. They swing improperly. They're not taught how to do a full body swing. So they'll often put more pressure on the muscles over the forearm, which causes tennis elbow. So that's the biggest thing we see. But I would say it's mostly weekend warriors. We'll get the kids coming in who are the high level kids because they're playing tennis, 25 hours a week, and certain things will wear down over time. But the majority of injuries we see are more the people who play 2, 3 times a week, who get out and play with some friends and sprain an ankle that way, or just don't do warm up. We'll see muscle pulls all the time from people who just don't warm up properly beforehand.
So is it fair to say, Russell, that recreational players are maybe more likely to get certain types of tennis injuries for some of the reasons that you say? They're just maybe not doing it properly, lacking in technique, or is it a little more, as you say, the warm-up type thing can really contribute?
Yeah, typically of every sport, we tend to see more recreation athletes getting hurt because again, there's just several factors: the warm up, the improper technique, and it's not just even just tennis. It could be squash, it could be hockey, it could be basketball, it could be baseball. People who just play it once in a while who aren't in conditioned or in shape for it. Pickleball is a prime example of that. It's certainly much more of an older population participating in it. And I see a lot of hamstring tears and calf pulls from that because people just aren't warming up beforehand. And they don't think it's that vigorous, but once you're running around a bit, and the aging population will unfortunately happen. But yeah, I would say on average, most of our stuff is going to be mostly recreation athletes who are as I say, the weekend warriors who are going to go out there and unfortunately hurt themselves doing that once in a while.
And talk to me a little bit about some of the most common types of tennis injuries that you see in this sort of recreational group, that over 30 crowd.
Definitely most commonest one is tennis elbow. We see that all the time. Tennis elbow. I'm sure you're going to talk about it, and I can get into it more depth if you wanted to. But we'll see tennis elbow mostly. Shoulder issues, again, improper swing technique. Amateurs don't necessarily use their hips and turn their hips like they should, and therefore they're swinging all arm, and therefore shoulders will go and elbows will go. And we'll see the sprained ankles, people on court that fall over, or the knees that hurt their knees that way. But I would say if I was to categorize all the tennis injuries I see, I'd say probably 67% are probably coming for tennis elbow or a shoulder issue.
Wow. So, walk me through some of the injury prevention advice. Maybe we'll start with tennis elbow, since, as you say, that's fairly popular or common.
Yeah.
Are there any specific injury prevention tips that you would have, or any certain exercises that you recommend people consider?
For sure. I mean, it's the full body. People need to have a very good shoulder strength for tennis. Um, being in the gym, not just going to play tennis twice a week, is doing stuff in the gym to strengthen the rotator cuff muscles. Tennis elbow, it's down here a little bit. Tennis elbow is on the back of the wrist, is where all the muscles that join up is be right there. And everything from little moving the little fingers, you'll see all the muscles moving there. So everything that lifts your wrist up will engage those muscles. And so you want to strengthen those muscles if you can, by doing wrist curls up, and then these ones wrist curls that way too. That'll strengthen the muscles there too. Having a proper racket is one of the most important things also too. People don't necessarily think that. They find the cheapest one or got one on sale or something, but grip size, the string tensile. I can't figure that word out right now. But the string tension
Yeah.
is so important also too. How big the grip is too, how big the racket is, how heavy the racket is, all those things come into play when it comes to tennis elbow. But to be blatantly honest with you, I would say out of let's say I have 100 tennis elbow people coming in, I bet you 10 are from tennis. We see tennis
Really?
elbow from everyday stuff. Just working out, playing different sports. I've hurt mine before playing hockey. So it's not just always tennis thinking you're going to get it. So it is common because it says tennis elbow in it, but it's not always the most common sport, believe it or not.
Right. So do you have, if you could come up with sort of a good regimen for someone who is, like I say, the recreational player over 30, what would you recommend as far as, someone wants to play tennis 2 or 3 times a week? What else should they be incorporating into their fitness routine or their physio routine in order to prevent injury?
You just got to do a proper amount of strengthening, even just twice a week, once, twice a week, having some bands at home where you can do some rotator cuff exercises where you're going in and out. Shoulder blade exercises are really important. Make sure you keep the back. Everything we do in society these days is all forward. On our phones, on our call right now, we're doing forward. We drive
Right.
forward. Everything's leaning forward there at all. We don't work the back. So we want to work the shoulder blade muscles to help keep that back and stabilize your shoulder a lot better. By doing that, that will help us, avoid injuries on the road. Anytime someone has a shoulder injury, we always give them those exercises to work on keeping the shoulder blades back and down. So working the shoulders in the gym, but doing them properly. So having a personal trainer or a therapist working with you is vital to make sure you're doing things properly. But again, it is to me, tennis elbow, I'll be honest with you, is just making sure you have good technique. It's going in for a lesson once in a while or having someone work with you to make sure you're hitting the ball correctly. You're not reaching for the ball. You're not just all arm, squash. You can get away with that. Squash very much is a wristy sport, much more wrist snapping as you are trying to hit
Right.
the ball. Tennis, it's a tougher sport. It's a heavier ball, and you got to really absorb it there too.
And would you have any major dues for people in this particular age playing category, things that you absolutely recommend they do in order to keep injuries at bay, and any major absolutely do not do that for them, major do's or don'ts?
Really, no. I mean, if you would say just more or less trying to stay in basic shape, trying to get some things. We talked about the wrist curls, rotator cuff strengthening, trying to you do that. There's no real major don'ts. The only thing I'd say you do is make sure a good warm up. What people don't do is they'll often show up to court. Their court time's on at 4 o'clock, and they show up at 3:59 and run on court and start playing right away. I'm sure you've done that once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
And
Guilty.
yeah, and people and most people do. And I tell people to arrive at least a half an hour beforehand and put a warm up. I've done some videos online on a tennis warm up on things you can do to get your foot speed going and your hamstrings and quads loosened up, ready to go, and get blood flowing to them too. So most time we see muscle pulls, I could say pretty prevalently that most muscle pulls were due to a poor warm up.
Okay.
So there's not exactly answering your question, but there's not exactly a do or a don't to avoid that injury. It's just it's a combination of things.
Now there are some funky gadgets available online. There are some
Yeah,
things you recommended. The one I have the one
I
bar
don't
that
think
we
I have
do
one in here.
the
Yeah,
rolling. I think it's called is it a Therabar?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's TheraBar.
Are there any of those things that you've seen that you're like, oh, worth the investment, or is it just the good old fashioned like get in the gym and pick up the weights type thing?
Yeah, it's mostly just that. You don't need the gadgets are all out there, and you can try them if you want to. There's not one right or wrong one. I do like the TheraBar from a rehab point of view because when something is hurt, when we work on the tennis elbow, we want to train it to work called what's called eccentrically. So as you lower a weight, so as you lift a weight up, that's called concentric, the muscle shortening, and as you lower it down, the muscle's eccentrically loading. And you want to, after an injury, you want to eccentrically load a muscle. So by using that TheraBar you were talking about, that's going to essentially load the extensor muscles in the back of the wrist here to help rehab it. You don't necessarily have to do that to train it because we do enough stuff throughout the day that's going to be using it. But after it is hurt, we can try to work on training it that way to get it back out there. But as you know, if you've had it before, and I've had it before, tennis elbow is a very, very slow, tedious injury that does not get better quickly. We've had good success with some things as far as laser and shockwave and cortisone shots and many different things, but everybody is different. When people come in saying, "Oh, I saw a friend of mine who said that laser got rid of it," and it may not get rid of it for them, or even acupuncture we can do sometimes too. So everybody's different. But it's a pain in the you know what.
Yeah.
It's a long-term injury that goes on for weeks, if not months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just lastly, any best advice or best practices for people who may be new to tennis, people who have not had, much of an introduction to the sport? They're maybe just picking up a racket for the first time. Any pointers for people who are starting to learn the game, who are maybe more of a beginner type of an athlete?
Yeah, it's a great sport. Love the sport for many, many years I played, and it's just getting to it slowly. It's the same thing. I treat a lot of marathoners and triathletes, and you're not going to run a marathon your first week out. You're going to train for weeks and weeks, if not months. So tennis is the same thing. If you're going to go out and play 5 days, in the first 5 days you're going to play, I guarantee I'll book the appointment for you next week. You're going to hurt yourself. So those things are going to happen, and that's just sort of logic that comes out with it. So I would start out with some lessons. If you just go out and hit the balls with some friends or hit your balls with your kids or something at the local courts, great. Just don't do too much. Most people who get hurt do it too much too soon, get excited. They love the sport and they get all excited about it. And they went out and played today and it feels great. And they go out and play tomorrow. And now they can't walk for 3 days.
Right.
So it like any sport, you just want to slowly build it up and don't go all in at one point, because then, yeah, you're going to hurt yourself for sure. It's a guarantee. Any sport.
Right.
Any sport would do the same thing, whether it's tennis or squash or whatever, basketball. So slowly get
Okay.
into it.
All right. Well, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for all the pointers. I will link to a couple of your previous videos above or below. And thank you again so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks, Russell.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.